this is. It's going to be more like having a lovely conversation with you all instead of talking to people who I can't see. So today we're going to be talking about digital marketing strategies for the busy webmaster. I feel like digital marketing strategies and stuff to do with social media is a bit of a taboo in our industry at the moment. So I am part of the Adobe Insiders team. There's 12 of us who are assigned to a different part of Creative Cloud for the year. And we recently had this kind of cringy meeting in New York City where they put all of our faces on a great big screen and asked us to do the thing that British people hate, which is get up and talk about yourself for 10 minutes or so. And all the other Americans were, super confident as they always are, and they started with their job titles. And I was like, oh my goodness, and my palms started to get sweaty. I was like, what is my job title nowadays? Maybe I'm an art director, but art director always sounds a bit stupid to me because it's like, oh, it's a bit over the top, like I'm a director of the arts. That just seems not right. I'm a UI UX designer, probably that's more fitting. I'm a web designer as well. I come from, used to learn how to do code when I was 16, 14, 15, 16, and I'm a web designer as well. But actually, really, I'm just more of a designer. So I started to have this horrible back and forth. And then actually, I thought, really what I am nowadays is more of a social media expert. But I feel like that job title is absolutely awful, and I would never assign it to myself. And the reason I know I'm not a social media expert is because words like reach, clout, and reciprocal liking kind of make me feel a bit sick. So people like this, I feel, have ruined the job title of social media experts. Now, let's call this guy Bob. I'm not hating on Bob here. I'm hating on the fact that Bob calls himself a social media expert. And he gets that title by following 50,000 people to get back 57.8 thousand people. I feel like we had to work really hard for our titles, and the title of web designer nowadays encompasses so much, and our learning throughout the years has never slowed down. It angers me that people who have never been in our industry and never written a line of code get to call themselves social media experts, when many of us, even if those of us who have been in the web for an awfully long time, wouldn't even dream of calling ourselves experts of the web, as we're always learning. A more fitting title for some of the work I do is probably social media designer, but that's not a thing either. Ironically, the term webmaster from the .com era is probably more fitting today than it was back then. I certainly prefer it to ninjas or full-stack developers. Whenever I hear full-stack developers, it just makes me think of pancakes for some reason. And for those of you who were in the web back in the old days, who remembers when we only had like a palette of web-safe colors to use, and they were all called really amazing things? So this is set in aquamarine and cornflower blue for nostalgia. So what I see at the moment is that we have kind of a defeatist attitude to social media. We kind of keep thinking that everything has already been done. We see these accounts where they have hundreds of thousands of followers, and our bosses and everyone is basically just asking us to get our follower count up. And the most common thing that I hear people say is, but this brand or this person has already got X amount of thousand people and we're never going to catch up. We already feel like we're way, way behind before we start. It's interesting to remember that we're still in the first 10,000 days of the web. If we want to break this down to how long social media and YouTube stardom has been a thing, it's 3,000 days. We are literally just getting started on this journey. And a really exciting thing is 33% of jobs don't exist right now that will in 2020. This quote from Gary Vee, "There is no social media," it's a slang term for a collection of apps and websites that now dominate the end consumer's attention in our society. We tend to think of social media as a collective of apps and services that need to be used together to get maximum benefit. There's not enough strategic thinking around why businesses choose to focus their efforts on one platform over another. We need to think of social media as websites. And websites are, funnily enough, kind of our thing, aren't they? We shouldn't ever have people like Bob, who have never been in our industry, telling us how best to use them. We're the ones coming up with the algorithms for the damn things, so we need to take the power back. I think some of us have been stuck in this form of consensual hallucination, which I know Jeremy Keith is a great big fan of calling things, which is that once upon a time we thought that we believed that collectively that the 960 grid was the size to design to for many years. We're falling into that same spell again in thinking that social media is kind of this thing that exists outside of our industry, and it's just a bunch of websites. Let's remember what is under the hood of this social media. It's not a special, magical, unicorn type of code. This is our thing. And no matter where you're at in the industry, whether you're just starting out, you're a seasoned pro, the fact that you're able to read something on that page really excites me. So we need to bring this whole thing back to being a bit more human. Once upon a time, we all probably remember, maybe if you've been in the web long enough, when we actually had to sell the benefits of being on the web to our clients. Who remembers those days when we used to have to put together actual proposals where we were like, I kind of think the web is going to be a thing. I think it's going to be like a big thing, and maybe you should think about having a website. Thankfully, we're past that now. But our businesses do need to get into the mindset of how can I help you and what can I do for you, instead of look at what I've got. Too many businesses at the moment are fighting for attention. They're putting their product in the front and center of every single social media post, rather than thinking to themselves how they can bring long-term value to their customer through the medium that is social media. They're instead shouting to grab a millisecond of the user's attention rather than playing the long game. And if you're still not convinced this talk is for you because you make websites, the average time spent on social media every day is 1 hour and 45 minutes, compared to a meager 15 seconds for the types of websites that you and I spend building in our entire days on. There's a massive problem of retention and attention on the websites that you and I make, especially if you're in news-type websites. If any of you are in news websites, you'll understand exactly what I mean. So quarterly design reviews are a good idea for many reasons. I'm not talking about changing up branding or typefaces every quarter. I'm talking about strategically designing social campaigns, collecting the data, and reviewing the wins and the failures quarterly. Everything I'm about to talk about in this talk should form part of your quarterly design review. And the first thing I'd like you to start with this year, if you haven't already sat down and done this, is figure out where your company might be chasing vanity metrics. We've all been part of the conversations where the boss simply wants to increase the number of followers rather than increase conversions. Now, who remembers when we went through that stage before with vanity metrics? How many of you remember this era of hit counters on the web? Quite a few of you. Great, you are my people. We went through this stage with hit counters back in the day. People were throwing around their hit counts. Everyone on their websites, they measured the success of their website based on how many hits you actually had on your website, even though when you refreshed the page, you could easily get another hit and count that towards that. So we're going through this all over again with vanity metrics on social media. So recently, Google came to my hometown. I'm just down the road in Southend-on-Sea, and they were running one of the Digital Garage workshops. And I thought, do you know what? Southend doesn't actually have a lot of tech events at all. I have to come up to London to see them. So even though the event actually was aimed at newbies, I really wanted to go along and just see how they were approaching social media with kind of new people and people not in our industry. And it kind of excited me that Google was just in Southend. So the event was aimed at social media, teaching people the basics of social media. And interestingly, there was a real mixed bag of people there. And the three people that stood out to me were the following. They worked in the following industries. One guy sold paisley ties, one guy was a mortgage broker, and another repaired washing machines. They all had the same question. How do I get my follower count up? And how do I become popular to get more likes on my content? Now, at this event, there was a guy kind of in the corner hovering who was really, really annoying me. And he was one of these people that when the speaker was talking, he was over-enthusiastically nodding as if to say to the Google guy, yeah, that's exactly how I would do things, yeah. And it was kind of getting really on my nerves. He put his hand up to answer these questions. And he said, what you need to be doing is posting 3 times a day for starters to every social network that you're part of. Not terrible advice, but let's think about that for a second. What content does the guy who sells paisley ties, a mortgage broker, and a guy who repairs washing machines. What would that content look like 3 times a day? So my face was a bit like this at that point, because it was right up there with people who beg for likes and shares on Facebook, only to have their friends and family like their page out of loyalty, skew their metrics forevermore, and their non-engagement rates. So I was kind of like, oh no, this is really bad. And then one of them said, what about this Snapchat thing? And the guy was like, oh, you don't need to worry about that. Basically, young people just send nudes to each other on it. And I was like, oh, this is getting really, really interesting. But I realized that I wasn't the target audience for this workshop, obviously before I went, but even more so when the Google guy said at the end of the day, so what did you all learn today? And one guy put his hand up and said, the Twitter. And I thought, wow, okay. It's probably more suited to someone like my dad, who actually rang Amazon this week to complain about his Gmail account. So we do need to check our personal bias with social media, especially one of the things I hear the most at the moment is actually Snapchat is one of the most misunderstood social networks. We do all tend to think of it as the age demographic of much lower than it actually is. One of the most engaged groups on Snapchat at the moment is 25 to 34-year-olds. Many people think it's much younger. And if any of you haven't actually run ads on Snapchat, Facebook ads network could learn a lot from the way that Snapchat run things. So you should just have a look at the way that the back end of that runs, even if you have no interest in running anything, just because it's actually really great UX UI. Again, Gary Vee said, I'm stunned at the lack of practitionership in this space, people who claim to have strong opinions on one social channel over another, but have yet to execute a single ad on any of these platforms. It is really hard. Our personal biases, I had a personal bias to LinkedIn until recently, until I realized that actually the whole network has changed. I used to think of it as something that kind of only professionals, as I used to call them, stayed on. Now I've realized that actually it's a great network, especially for finding talent. We recently had some job, one of the places that I work, we recently had a job go out on LinkedIn for a social media manager. And I was amazed at how many people put themselves forward for the roles, saying, I think I'd be good for this role because I use social media a lot every day. And I was like, okay, that's probably one of the worst things you could have said to me. But there is a massive lack of practitionership in this space at the moment. So what I'd like to talk about today is some network specifics, bring you up to speed on what's new and what you can implement right now. I'm not going to mention every social network because there's kind of a lot of them, but just the main ones and the bits that you could potentially take home as of the next couple of days and tweak in your company and use straight away. So how many of you, just out of interest, are using a Facebook pixel on your site at the moment? How many people know what a Facebook pixel is? Not too many people. I would have expected more than that. So Facebook Pixel, for those of you who don't know, is essentially like a tracking device. And I know that Facebook is the root of all evil right now with data and stuff like that. But actually, if you have one installed, it can bring up some really, really fascinating data about your users. You can set end goals on your website, and it can track end-to-end whether your Facebook marketing is working. But also, it can track audiences in a way that I've not actually seen any other platform do as successfully as Facebook does. You can remarket to an audience who perhaps hasn't bought but has gone onto your website. So you end up having all these really great data pockets to use later on. On Facebook, marketers who use video grow revenue 49% faster than non-video users. Videos up to 2 minutes at the moment get the most engagement, and native videos on Facebook have 10 times higher reach compared to YouTube links. So for those of you who don't know, I have a store back home in Leigh-on-Sea, which is essentially, it's a hair salon, and I had a bit of a mad moment back in 2013 where I bought a building, didn't really know what to do with it, and then turned it into essentially my UI UX playground for different things. And it's been really great because it means that things like this, I get to actually show you real-time stats because there's no leak of data, and I'm happy to share it with you guys so that you can learn. So this is my actual Facebook account for the salon. It's a small salon. It's just in my local town. It's not a big thing, but the metrics are actually really, really interesting. So you can see how incredibly low the CPM rate on each of the videos is. It's just a few pence. For those of you who don't know, CPM means cost per 1,000 views, essentially. So marketing speak, you'll hear a lot of people talk in CPM rates. So you see that there's lower conversions and higher cost per 1,000 eyeballs on your thing. For static-led image posts. So videos right now are the cheapest way to actually get advertising on Facebook, and the engagement rate is really, really super high compared to static. The official stance on this is that videos, the engagement is highest on posts with videos, which we know at 13.9%, and photos at 13.7%, although personally I found the engagement on photos to be considerably lower, half of that, than the video as seen above. Over half video content is viewed on mobile, and 85% of video content on Facebook is watched without sound. Although there's no metrics available for other social networks in terms of videos without sound, I would be tempted to take that knowledge and apply it to other social networks. If your company is not actually subtitling their videos, they are missing a trick because of the amount of people who are watching without sound, and this is what I use to do it. It's called SRT, and it's a very cheap Mac application which you can just use to actually write out what your short videos are saying in the subtitles for it. So this is one of the few solid examples that we know performs consistently well under the new Facebook algorithm, and that is Facebook Live videos. They have 6 times the engagement of regular videos right now. So if your company is not building in live video, although I think it's inherently British of us to steer away from live content, and the main problem seems to be is finding willing participants to be in live video. You try and do stuff in the States and they're all over it. You come to England and everyone's like, I don't want to be on camera. So I think British companies are going to battle this a bit harder than some other places around the world. But Facebook Live videos is where we need to be going. And for those of you who don't realize that Facebook Audience Insights exists, you don't have to use this for anything to do with Facebook. This is actually scraping data of every customer on Facebook, but you can use this for any campaign that you wish. It's a free tool, and it's in the back end of Facebook Business. So this is something that you can actually use for whatever campaign you're trying to run. You can stick in a few bits of data, and it will actually chuck back at you what the correlation is between certain things. So just to give you an example of that, this is what web designers all have in common with one another. And my favorite is under the wine and spirits section. It's listed as tequila. So I think that we got there by frantically trying to learn Vue, React, and Angular, and believing that we all must commit code to memory and never look anything up. That's how I think we ended up with tequila in that. So this was what Mark Zuckerberg put out recently. You're going to see less public content like posts from businesses, brands, and media, and the public content you see is going to be held to the same standard. It should encourage meaningful interactions between people. So it means if you have been seeing certain posts from brands where it's like, comment on what your favorite ice cream is, and they sell clothes, they're starting to downgrade posts like that where it's baiting certain things. So they're actually looking for meaningful content and chucking away the stuff that's baiting just for engagement. One of the most common things that I hear about Facebook advertising is that it doesn't work for my company. And this is a good soundbite to take back for anyone who's struggling with this in meetings with your bosses. It's never that Facebook advertising doesn't work. It is that you haven't quite got the creative right. It is not that your customers are not on Facebook. It all comes down to the creative. So whether that's changing the text that you're using, changing the types of images, everything on Facebook comes down to the creative. I've never seen a company not be able to actually perform and engage better on Facebook than they can with Google right now. If it's not working, you've not found the right images, descriptions, captions, or you're not targeting the right demographics for you. Luckily, an update to Facebook Business means that it's easier than ever to run multiple creative under the same campaign. So once upon a time, we had to actually create different campaigns to test different images and see how well they performed. Now Facebook includes it within your budget at no extra cost, and it only pushes the creative that's actually performing the best so that your budget doesn't get spent on creative that's not actually performing very well. So on to Google. How many people out of interest run Google campaigns, or within their company they're still running Google ads quite a lot? A number of you. I personally am using it less and less because I find that we can get better engagement cheaper on Facebook. And our cost for conversions are significantly higher for keywords on Google than they are on any other platform. So this was one of the metrics I discovered hiding in one of our AdWord accounts at work, and conversions were actually turned off. The marketing department had been measuring the success of their campaign by impressions rather than conversions, which for this and for most campaigns is a bad thing. I actually took great delight in catching out an SEO expert at work the other day who had a spend of £350,000 across his whole Google ad account. And some of the figures on the surface looked kind of impressive, but when I actually asked him to turn on the conversion metrics, he flat out refused and blamed it on bad cookie tracking, which was interesting, closed his laptop and promptly moved on. So as you can see from this screenshot, this was the conversion rate for 3 people. So we were actually paying £372.39 to have 3 people fill out one of the forms on our website. And no one had thought that that was bad because the conversion rate and the CPM rate was so high, the amount of eyeballs actually seeing the content. But when you turned on the conversions, it actually painted a very, very different picture. So when you hear marketers talking about CPM rates, which you hear people talk about a lot, it can seem very impressive, but the best thing you can do is ask them to turn on the conversion rate and watch them crumble, especially if they say that they are SEO experts. You can take great delight in that. So there was a larger problem at play with the client's display ads, and the creative hadn't actually been changed in 8 months. There were only 4 pictures being shown, and that's the problem with display ads right now. The moment something works, we sadly ruin it. We were able to transform the conversions by using trends.google.com to identify long-tail keywords. If you haven't actually ever used trends.google.com, which a lot of people I speak to don't even know it exists, it's a really, really excellent back-end platform so that you can actually see what people are searching for and identify keywords that maybe you hadn't picked up as a company that will cost less to market to. Another good thing is Google My Business, which again is neglected by many companies. This is Google My Business for my business back home, and it would be really easy to think that it wasn't worth doing because of the rates of engagement on it. However, because I'm able to hear what people are saying when they come into the salon, we've started doing posts on Google My Business for updates, and although they're only seen by maybe a couple of thousand people, we've found that it actually targets the right people somehow, and it's not used very much. So actually updating the Google section of your businesses is something that is underused, and the engagement rates seem quite high right now. So if we were to look at this post, for example, only 220 people saw this particular post, but when I was actually in the salon, we heard it spoken about so much that people were seeing it. Oh yeah, I saw that pop up on my Google. I don't know where that came from. It was very strange because I was dubious about this platform as well, but it is working very well at the moment. Moving on swiftly to Instagram, the big one. 800 million monthly active users, and to put this into perspective, that's double the amount of active users for Twitter and 3 times the monthly active users for WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. A lot of people have been speaking recently about the Instagram algorithm changing and moaning about it. You'll hear a lot of, if you follow a lot of bloggers and vloggers, they're all moaning about an algorithm change. And the algorithm has changed to push content up of people whose content you like, people who you direct message, and people who you search for, because it signals that you're interested in their account but not seeing their content. And it's also people who you know in real life, as it's pulling that data from Facebook. Instagram belongs to Facebook and has done for many years. So Instagram actually found that most 70% of users weren't actually seeing content in their chronological feeds. People were having to go off and search for it. So what a lot of people don't realise about social networks is that they are a problem of their own success in some ways. They have to change their algorithm to deal with the problem of success. To stop you having to go off and search, they're going to actually logically try and push the people up who you're most interested in. This is why it's changed, and many people are not very happy about it at all because they feel like they're actually losing content, but it tends to be the content that they weren't really looking at anyway. In order to fix this problem, after speaking to someone at Instagram, they said the only way that they could have fixed the problem of people following too many accounts was to limit everyone to 50 users to follow. They couldn't do that, so they had to change the algorithm. That's the reason why it changed. So the onus is still on you to create compelling content to inspire engagement and rank higher in people's feeds. And a lot of people don't think about this in this way, but hashtags are actually the plumbing of the Instagram ecosystem. A lot of people, I find in our industry, we're kind of a bit cringed out about hashtags. We find them a bit strange. But you can use this website, which is also cringily named Hagtashify, to find relevant hashtags that you might not have thought about for your company. So for me, I don't think that hashtags are there for users to read. It's a bit like how we separate style from markup. They're there for discoverability and should ideally be commented separately to the text that accompanies the post. Posts with hashtags have a 12.6 higher engagement rate than posts without, and 11 hashtags are apparently the optimal amount. I think that's quite a lot, but apparently that is the optimal amount for it. We're seeing this strange thing as well where bloggers and Instagrammers are trying to beat the algorithm, where you'll see that they're trying to send traffic in a round-robin fashion backwards to their own accounts because they know that it's not being seen, but because Instagram Stories has a higher engagement rate on some people's feeds, they're telling people that they've posted on their Instagram account, which is a very strange thing that we're dealing with at the moment. So a lot of people don't realise that this exists in Instagram as well. Archiving posts. We just had this with my salon back home back in February when we had a lot of snow. Sometimes you have to put out topical posts because you need to reach your audience quickly. But because Instagram is an aspirational, inspirational platform, you don't necessarily want certain things to stay on your feed. So there's a way of archiving posts. It actually removes them from the feed without deleting them, so you could bring back all the engagement if you needed to. A lot of people also don't realise one of the most common things I get tweeted after this is how do you record on your iPhone? And a lot of people don't realise it's in Control Center. You can turn it on and record anything you want. It's Control Center and customised controls. We use this at work. Planoly is a really great app to use if you're having to actually post a lot of Instagram content but you want to automate it. We use Planoly. It's fairly cheap, and it now auto-posts to Instagram as long as the content is in a square format for some unknown reason. So I just want to breeze through influencer marketing because a lot of people are having to deal with this at the moment. They are underpriced right now and creating incredible value for brands, especially micro-influencers. Anyone with under 35,000 followers is seen as a micro-influencer because you can pick them up quite cheaply, but their audiences are really super engaged with them. So bloggers with excellent engagement levels are actually quite rare. When you look at this particular blogger, Lydia Elise Millen, her engagement rate on Instagram stories on the left, she's converting an incredible amount of her 500,000 followers to her stories every day. This then translates to direct revenue for brands, as you can see on the right-hand side. She was one of the top bloggers for a perfume campaign that they ran. A survey from Nielsen showed that 33% of people trust advertisements, while 90% of people put their faith in recommendations. If your company is not looking at how to actually work with influencers right now, now is the time to start doing it before everyone does it and raises the price up of where you can currently get them. And the US influencer marketing industry is estimated to grow from 500 million to a 5 to 10 billion industry by 2020. And the reason is they are creating incredibly high-value content, and the actual videos and photographs that they post are beautiful. They're then putting them in their Instagram stories and getting natural placement, which is really important for brands. The most important thing, though, is when you're looking at influencers is to check their engagement rates, because sometimes people buy followers from various different sources. I'm sure we've all had DMs from them in our Instagram inboxes asking if we want to buy 10,000 followers. The best place to look at their engagement rates is actually something called lefty.io, and anything above 3% engagement rate is actually pretty good. Although it sounds terrible, it's actually pretty good for the influencer industry because of the algorithm change that we just spoke about. So how much do influencers cost? The average sponsored post rate is currently at $180. So I'm guessing that's probably about £2, £250. And the average engagement rate is 5.3. However, I've seen it around 3% being quite good. So the problem that we see with social media is keeping up with content creation. This seems to be a massive problem. So I want to show you how someone else is doing it really well in a small case study. Out of interest, who has heard of Away right now? Great, perfect. So Away is gaining a massive amount of traction in the States, and their social campaigns we can all learn quite a bit from. They have been expanding in the States since 2016. And this is what they do. On the surface, it seems quite simple. It's a plastic suitcase with a USB charger in it, which is nothing revolutionary at all, which is actually why I love to feature case studies like this, because on the surface, there is not a lot to it. Plastic suitcase, USB charger, really, really great marketing. So the two people behind it are friends Jen Rubio and Steph Corey. They launched Away in February 2016 and have been featured on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. Former Warby Parker and one of them ran the supply chain at Casper mattresses. Again, nothing particularly revolutionary about these suitcases. They raised 20 million in Series B funding, which, you know, there's part of me that wants to say how, but they did. And they've currently sold 20 million in luggage, shipping 100,000 bags since founding in February of 2016. So the brands dominating social media right now are those with the most agile teams who have exceptional storytelling capabilities while bringing actual value to their users. So what can we learn from these guys who are doing this exceptionally well? The thing they do is they are incredible storytellers. The one thing that they're doing, which seems so incredibly simple when it's pointed out, as all the best things do, is they've been very brave with their marketing by identifying the one thing that everyone has in common when they're using this case. And the one thing everyone has in common is travel. So you can imagine the discussions around their boardroom in some companies. I don't understand how creating travel guides is going to increase sale conversions, which you can understand in some ways. They're playing the long game. They're bringing value back to the user. And this comes back to the how can I help you over look at what I've got. It's looking at what that level is in your companies, or if you're a freelancer, whatever it is that you're doing, looking that level above the thing that you're trying to put in the front and center, and finding the bigger storytelling picture, because you're going to run out of content on socials really quickly if you've just got a product to keep showing. So they've smartly said, actually, we know that travel is in common with this. We're going to go that level above, because then that opens up a whole world of storytelling possibilities other than us just having to put front and center plastic suitcases. So their competitors are meanwhile leading with headings like this: from the smallest case-hardened solid steel machine screw to our exclusive virtually non-abrasion-proof FXT ballistic nylon fabric. Boring. That is the difference between a company that is putting the product front and center and another company that has identified its storytelling thread. So they've created compelling creative that's really quirky and fun. They've got stopgap animation GIFs that perfectly illustrate their product without being too engineered. And they also work with influencers. As someone who owns one of these, because I got totally sucked in by the marketing, the funniest thing is seeing the sheer delight on people's faces when you plug your phone into a suitcase at the airport. I liken it to the same feeling I've had for years about plugging phones into hotel lamps. I don't know if anyone else has ever found that when you get into a hotel and the first thing you have to do is find the charging point, and it's always in a lamp, which is kind of weird. So loads of people this summer have been contacted by Away, especially now that they've just expanded into a London store. I think it opened literally last week. They have been gifting these suitcases left, right, and centre, to the point that celebrities are now wandering through airports with them. That then has a knock-on effect. The celebrities are seen in magazines like Hello, and they start to gain traction over here as well. So this was their Thanksgiving campaign last year. And as you'll see, it's a real mixture of really great creative sent in by users, and the product isn't always front and center. It is in some posts, but the way it's actually shown is kind of just natural placement over front and center placement. And they keep things fresh. They always have something to talk about, because they've got natural storytelling capabilities with travel, but they're always working on collaborations. So they just did a whole section on, I think, what's called Millennial Pink right now. They just released a load of Millennial Pink suitcases, and they did a collaboration with Minions. But most of all, the creative is really simple. The wording is fantastic if you want to look at a way of actually looking at copywriting. For short ads, some of their stuff is really, really excellent. But moreover, they've identified their market. This is when I was traveling in Chicago. This was the airport trays that you put all the stuff in for security. They'd taken the whole lot. Every single one was branded, and that is just smart placement. Their Facebook stuff, everything that they're working with, again, goes back to working with influencers and why you might wish to work with influencers. They're used to creating high-quality content. They're working with so many of them that they then have this lovely knock-on effect where their Facebook pages, Instagram pages, if you actually want to look at how to engage users to actually send in really high-quality content, it's sickening how much great content they have by people just wanting to be featured on their feed. If you look at their hashtag for Away, the feed of stuff coming in every single day is like a marketer's dream, because there's all these influencers working with them who have actually purchased the suitcase, not just been gifted it, purchased the suitcase and taken it out for an actual shoot because they want to be featured on the Away pages. It's really, really a great case study to take back and look at how one brand is doing the whole thing correctly. Also, if you want to look at competitor keyword bidding for content ideas and how to grow your brand, I was interested to see who their competitors were, so I used this thing called SpyFu, that's Spy, S-P-Y-F-U. You can look at what competitor keywords are on Google and see how they're actually marketing against other big competitors. So they intersperse selling with relevant stories. This is always giving them plenty to talk about. Again, comes back to that layer of interest that sits above the product that you're trying to sell. And it doesn't matter which touch point you actually go to with them, whether it's their newsletters or whether you actually buy a suitcase from them. Their end-to-end experience and every single touch point of the business is thought about, designed, and has some form of influencer marketing imagery led inside it as well. So just to finish for the last few minutes, I want to talk about when things go bad. Now, this was a collaboration that was happening, I believe it was around last November, and when the stuff started coming through, I thought, do you know what? I think this is going to be a car crash. So I'm going to start taking some screenshots of this because this has got disaster written all over it. And this was the Cath Kidston / Peter Pan collaboration that they did last year. Now, on the surface, everything seemed really great. They were doing really beautiful social posts. They were seeding their email campaigns with really great creative. They were doing this whole build-up. So the whole thing was you weren't able to actually buy this stuff until it went live on the website, and they were having this whole countdown thing. So they designed these beautiful mail shots, teaser shots, and they were building excitement for the big day, and everything was done absolutely stunningly. Every single thing that was posted on socials was done well, and they had all these beautiful animations. And they started to really create this buzz. Can't sleep, you know, are you that excited that you can't sleep to get hold of this Peter Pan stuff? And then when the big day came, you got this email, and it said, your password is star. And you went to the website, pumped in the password, and, now open. You were then met with this. Do not refresh your page. You're in a queue, which is really great user experience when you've waited for this. So I waited, went and got a cup of tea and some biscuits and sat there and thought, this is dreadful. I can't believe that there's probably hundreds of people sitting here right now waiting for a website to open, which is a very strange concept. And then when it did, this is what I was greeted with. Now, we're all web designers in here. I hope that we can all see what the lacking part of this shop is. Can anyone see how you would actually buy this item? How you might add to cart? So this poor web designer, I think, had left the add to cart button off of this big launch. So what then happened was a flurry of tweets. Now, the really interesting misconception about our industry is that our users are very impatient, won't wait, won't do things, always think that we've broken websites. Actually, that's not the case. When something goes wrong, more often than not, the users think it's something to do with them first. So I started tracking the Twitter feeds because this started to get really funny because certain people genuinely thought that it was just them that didn't have the buy button and that someone had a personal vendetta against them. So the language on this was, it was getting angrier and angrier and angrier. Why have I not got add to bag? I can't buy this Peter Pan stuff. It was getting so angry across everything. So at which point, Cath Kidston put out a tweet and said, we're fixing it, just wait, everyone just wait, we're gonna fix this problem. You got pushed back to this. So you'd queued, I think it was about 40 minutes in total to get into the website, and then we actually were then chucked back to this page. So I thought, I'm going to sit this out. I'm in it now. I'm in for a penny, in for a pound. I'm going to sit and see what happens with this. Waited for another, I think it was about another 20 minutes, got back in. Yay, the add to cart button was back. Everything was wonderful. When I actually clicked on add to bag, because I thought, do you know what, I wasn't even bothered about this thing now, but for some reason I feel like I now need to buy this sweatshirt because I feel like I've been on a journey with them all. I pressed add to bag, and this happened again. So at which point I was like, okay, you've lost me now. You've absolutely lost me. Your beautiful social campaign has not delivered on the back end. So I actually reached out to Cath Kidston. I was like, hey, was anyone on the team for the Cath Kidston launch during the Peter Pan collaboration? I'd love to talk to you, because I did think that maybe there was just this poor web designer in a corner rocking, like, I can't believe I left the add to cart button off of this massive campaign. Funnily enough, no one got back to me about this, so I was never able to get to the bottom of it, but it's kind of a great case study for when social, like, you can have this beautifully planned out campaign, but when social goes bad. Anyway, to wrap up what we've spoken about today, design once, use everywhere. Design your campaigns for the year, shoot the imagery early, and then use them everywhere. Repurpose the content as much as possible. Ensure the networks that you're pursuing strategically make sense for your business. Don't just pursue one network because your boss is telling you that you need to get more followers on that network. Make sure that it makes sense. If you repair washing machines, for example, what would your Instagram content be? Find your story for social media longevity. Problem is always keeping up with the content creation, so find what that story is that sits above what the product is that you're trying to sell. Thank you very much, and if anyone is looking for a job, I am looking for a web designer for something. So I don't do back-end or front-end anymore, I only do design. If there's anyone here who is looking for a new gig, please come and find me. Thank you very much for being a lovely audience.